Hello, and welcome to the Bilingual Montessori webinar series. My name is Amy Tobias, a part of the Bilingual Montessori team. Today, I would like to introduce you to Lucie Urbančíková from Prague, Czech Republic. Lucie will be sharing with us her practical ideas for the assessment of a bilingual program. This information is applicable for whole school programs, leaders and coordinators, as well as for individual classroom guides. I know you will really enjoy this presentation as Lucie takes us from a big picture view of assessment to the small details that are necessary for this comprehensive and valuable process. She introduces a clear understanding of vocabulary that can help you to have knowledgeable discussions around this topic within your communities. This webinar will aid you by giving you tools to have a more accurate view of your students' learning so you can support their progress and inform your communication with parents and administrators. Lucie has a master's degree in experiential education and holds certificates for teaching English to speakers of other languages, teaching English as foreign language, as well as to young learners. She's been involved in the second language acquisition field since 2004. Her great passion is to think about ways to seamlessly blend the needs of L2 acquisition and Montessori principles so that the children acquire the language according to their developmental needs. She attended 3 AMI assistant courses for the ages of 3 to 6, 6 to 12, and 12 to 18 to get a deeper understanding of the Montessori principles in order to be able to combine them with her expertise in L2 teaching principles. She has worked in a beautiful Montessori school for 5 years, and she is also a very important part of our bilingual Montessori team. So welcome, Lucie.
Hello, welcome to the webinar with the topic of assessment in bilingual programs. My name is Lucie Urbančíková, and before I start sharing the screen, I just would like to share with you why did I choose this topic and where does the interest in assessment come from. I know for some, assessment may be a very boring topic, but it's a true passion for me. And the reason is that I find assessment an incredible tool that provides me with information and pillars I can lean on when working with either children, colleagues, the school, as well as parents. So for me, assessment is a great helper, a great tool, and hopefully some of the information from my presentation will be of use to you as well. Let's get started. For me, what is very important to mention at the very beginning that during my presentation, the way I approach assessment is using the whole school approach. So all the parties, all the constituents that take part in the assessment will be mentioned in this presentation. And even though Amy already introduced me, I just would like to mention and maybe emphasize the 3 points of view or 3 perspectives I use in this for this topic. First of all, I'm an ESL teacher in a Montessori school in the Czech Republic, and I work with children in elementary and in the adolescent environments. I'm also what we call an ESL coordinator at our school across all planes of development, where we have children starting at a year and a half, and graduating at the age of 15. So that's where my middle level administrator perspective comes in. And I'm a parent of 2 teenage children. In other words, I do know what I need to know as a parent. Not only as a teacher, I want to provide information, but also I know personally what information is important to me. And the topic of assessment is rather complex, at least the way I see it. And for me, a way how to approach it was to use the onion analogy, where I will try to go layer by layer to peel the topic to get to the core. So what are the layers? The first layer, I will mention something about the parties involved in the assessment process. Second of all, I will mention different types of assessment. Thirdly, I will share all the phases of assessment, all the phases we need to take care of when we decide to run any form of assessment. And last but not least, kind of a unifying layer are the examples. And the examples will connect all the three previous layers and hopefully make it more tangible. So the first layer, parties involved. Very frequently used shape of a triangle, where there are three main parties involved: parents, the pupils, then the teachers, and the school itself. The reason why I set up the triangle this way is that the teachers have usually more direct contact with the pupils as well with the parents, but there also school plays an important role. And I would like to also mention, why did I start with the first constituent group as the parents? The parents are the ones that choose the school. And I don't know in your environments, but in the Czech Republic, majority of Montessori schools are private. So if we take care of the parents, the pupils will be happy. So that's the main, those are all the three parties involved. Each of these parties involved has its own specific needs. So in terms of the parents, very frequent questions that I come across is the school going to meet the needs of my child? What is the profile of the school graduate? And is my child on the way to reach the school graduate profile? In other words, is my child going to succeed? From the pupil perspective, the most frequent question I encounter is, will I make friends in my class? Will I be able to keep up with my classmates? In other words, will I be able to learn what my classmates will be able to learn? And will I enjoy my time at school? And last but not least, there's also needs of the school and the teachers. How do we know our students are progressing? Is our educational plan meeting the needs of today's world? And are the needs of our pupils and parents met? And as we can see that the needs on one hand vary, but at the same time they overlap. So assessment geared towards meeting the needs or collecting information of one constituent group almost always provides information for the other parties in this triangle involved. So that's another aspect I really like about the assessment. It's not the one purpose only, it's multi-purpose activity that helps everyone to learn something new. So we covered the parties involved. Let's look at the types of assessment. Well, what is assessment? Sometimes to define something is the easiest by saying what it is not. Well, assessment is not evaluation. For some of you, this may be obvious, but for some other countries where there's only one term that represents both assessment and evaluation may be a challenge. This is an example of the Czech Republic where we have only one term that's more the context of evaluation, and assessment usually kind of falls in that it's the evaluation. So assessment is different from evaluation. So how do they differ? Assessment is ongoing, is positive, is individualized, is diagnostic, and is process-oriented. In terms of evaluation, it is applied against standards. It shows strengths and weaknesses. It provides closure. And it's summative. And as you can see in this diagram, there's an area where assessment evaluation overlap. So what do they have in common? Both of them require criteria. They use measures and are evidence-driven. In terms of the types of assessment, there are 3 basic types: assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning. Again, for those languages that are not as lucky as in English, where there's the word learning as the central point, and then only the prepositions change, that we have, of course, other words that define these types of assessments. For learning is diagnostic. It helps us to diagnose and follow the learning process. Formative is assessment as learning. It's a guide or it's a way how we can guide the learner through their learning process. And the reason why I said learner, not the pupil or a child, because we can work formatively with our colleagues as well as with the parents, because they are on their learning journey as well. And assessment of learning is summative. It identifies how much was learned. The diagnostic assessment usually happens after the session, where it provides immediate feedback, both the learner and the adult. It informs the adult or the teacher and the school of the quality of their teaching. And when I use the term quality, it doesn't mean that when something does not go through really well, that it's bad. But we need the assessment, the diagnostic assessment, to realize, well, maybe next time we should introduce this topic in a different way. So going to the formative assessment, usually it has a format of self-reflection and monitoring of the learning process by the learner, whoever that is. And the summative assessment is usually performance-based against benchmarks or curriculum requirements, goals and standards. But as you will see through the examples I'll share, the assessment of learning kind of overlaps more with the evaluation, but it can be done in a formative way. I think the examples will help you to understand it more clearly once we get to the point. Here, I try to combine the previous 2 slides where there are the different types of assessments, the way how it overlaps with evaluation and the evaluation itself. Of course, there are different types of evaluation, but because the topic of this webinar is assessment, and as we saw the onion at the very beginning, I want to really strictly stick to the layers and not to get sidetracked. So that's why the evaluation doesn't have any division at this moment. We are progressing to the 3rd layer, how to run the assessment. Here, it's a as you see the visualization here, it's a circle. That's where all the phases are interconnected. In the first phase, we need to define the needs for the assessment. We need to know why we're doing it and so on. Second of all, knowing what the needs are, we need to design the assessment tool, and we need to think about the format of data collection. In other words, how are we going to collect it? Where we are going to record it. Then it's the implementation. So we do the assessment, and at the end, we need to interpret the collected data and share the outcomes. And usually what happens when we go through all these 4 phases and we're interpreting the data and sharing the outcomes, usually 2 things happen. One, where we realize, oh, we need more information about this area. So one assessment provides the needs for another assessment. And secondly, second option that happens is that once the assessment is over, we realize how we can improve the assessment process, because some assessment is done periodically. So interpreting the data and sharing the outcomes helps us to define our assessment tool, which we may be developing in-house. So what are the needs for the assessment? As with anything, the better we prepare, the better the outcome is. And for me, this phase is, I don't want to say the most important one, because all of them are important, but it's like the seed. If I plant the right seed, I will get the flower or the tree or the plant I was hoping for. So how to select the right seed? So we need to know what I want to assess, why do I need the data and what for, or also who do I need it for. There is going to be a difference if I need to collect data for the Ministry of Education, or for the parents, or for our for the guides and teachers. How am I going to collect the data? That's very closely connected with the what I want to assess, because it can be, the assessment can be done online, it can be done in person, it can be done in writing, reading. There are many, many different formats. So I need to know how am I going to collect the data. Crucial part, how am I going to document the data? Because when the assessment is running, and in the context of Montessori schools, very frequently it's done through conversations or interviews or speaking in general, that how to document what was said and how to get the information from these interviews. If I'm not the one who does the assessment, I also need to have staff who is going to do the assessment. At the same time, at larger schools, it may happen that not one person can do all the assessments. So there needs to be a team of assessors that help to run the assessment. At the same time, they need to be on the same page in terms of how the assessment is done. Designing the assessment tool. We need to know what type of assessment I want to run, whether it's going to be for learning, as learning, or off learning. At the same time, I've experienced or I've created assessments where it combines 2 of the areas, which I'm going to share with you later on during this webinar. But here are just some examples of each of the types of the assessment tools. So for example, with the diagnostic observations, Observations is a tool that in the Montessori setting is used very frequently, and at the same time a part which I know that I had to work on a lot is how to document my observations so I can harvest the information, because just observing was not enough for me, because there's so much information during the school day, as all of you know, that even though I tell myself I will not forget this, well, I do. So observations and a way how to document the information. Here's what I mentioned is note on the learner's progress and learning needs. That's very closely connected with the observations, but it may gear or it may aim at a slightly different area. That's why it's separate. And the types of questions I can ask the students: how helpful did you find this analogy, this material, or this activity? And I really like to ask this question a lot, because it helps me to get more into the heads of the children. Because even though I try to think like they do, there's a slightly bigger age gap between me and the students, and really the children today think differently than I can imagine. So this information really helps me to understand their way of thinking and adapt and create the material that's more natural for them to use. So the assessment tools for formative assessment. Questions such as, what did you learn today? What do you need to continue practicing? And for the summative assessment, I mentioned it previously that even the summative assessment can be done in a formative way. And my huge inspiration is Dylan Williams' 3-color test, which I adapted, and I will share it with you at the end of this presentation. So you will see a real example of how it is done. Third step: implementation and data collection. So we run the assessment, we have all the information, and then what we need to do, we need to interpret the data, we need to process it somehow in such a format that is easy for others to understand, to follow, and to benefit from. And as this circle closes, and I already mentioned that usually what happens, another circle is starting as we finish one assessment, but it never happens at the same level. For me, it's like a spiral that keeps going up. It's the same phases, but with every assessment, I'm a little bit higher because of the learning process or the learning curve working with the assessments. And here comes the practical part of this webinar. And here are the examples. So the first example are my teacher notes. The type of assessment it's an assessment for learning. And the purpose why I've created this format of taking my notes is, first of all, to have one place where I can write down all my observations right after the presentation. As I, and of course you as well, have several presentations back to back, that I really need to be here and now. So I cannot think about what happened during the previous presentation or what my observations were and be fully present with the next group. So I need a place where I can write my notes. And it takes me like 1 or 2 minutes after each presentation, but is incredibly valuable for me. The information I write down is to improve my presentation and to tailor them to the needs of specific children. Even though I present the same topic to the children, each group is different and each child is different. So for some group, I need to make a note of how to adjust it next time so they benefit from it the most. I need to improve my teaching materials. As I work with children that are at the A1, A2 level of the Common European Framework of Languages, that I cannot take full advantage of the Montessori language materials, which are created for the purpose of learning mother tongue. So I'm developing materials that their task is to kind of onboard the children into the English language world so they can start using the Montessori materials. That's why I need to keep improving my teaching materials so they make the biggest advancements possible. And to say the least, to keep track what I covered. Because one thing is the plan, the other thing is what is carried out. And if I don't cover everything I planned, 99% of time, the reason is that a child has a question that is to the point and takes us deeper into the area than what I planned. For example, today, as we were talking about sentence structures, an 8-year-old said, "Oh, Lucy, there is a verb in every sentence." And then we talked about it more because that was of their interest. So I need to keep track of what I covered. And at the same time, I put in an area where I can quickly note the child's activity. And here comes the practice. I know this is a very far away photo of my teacher's notes, but I will take them close up in a little while. But first, I wanted you to see the whole page. So I always have 2 days per page because as I work with the children 4 days a week. And this is what the structure of my teacher's note is. So there's the topic, the goal for the lesson, language skills. I circle which ones are what I'm working on, whether it's a grammar point, vocabulary, understanding, spoken interaction, spoken production, reading or writing. Here I have name of the children. The way I work is I work with specifically set groups. Sometimes I combine them, but most of the time they work in specific groups. And here where I note the activity of the child during the presentation. Here is the activity and here is the focus. So I just take a pen and just cross out whatever color is relevant for the activity of the child. And here comes the lesson plan. No, I just cut it up so you see the whole page. So the lesson plan is just bullets. Link here means how am I going to link today's presentation to the presentation I had the day before. And I wrote a very brief outline of what I'm planning on doing. And after the presentation, I just go and I just tick what was done and cross out what was not done, or sometimes even add what I added during the presentation because I felt that they need more practice in a different area than I anticipated. Last but not least, a very important part, and I have more room on the paper, on the page than it's here, is reflection. It's a very quick reflection on, like, did the presentation work or did it not work? Why did it work? Why did it not work? What is my aha moment? And also what to do next time. Because when I finish one presentation, I'm in the flow of that group and I know what should follow the next time. And having 7, 8, 9 groups a day, that I would lose the track of the flow. So that's where I write this very important information. And this paper, eventually I bind all these teacher notes. And for me, this is what I called my external hard drive, because the capacity of my memory is limited. Okay, example number 2, student journals. This is an example I dare to incorporate into this webinar, even though it's not elementary children 6 to 12, but this is what I use with children in our adolescent program 12 to 15. But I know that some upper elementary children are capable of following the principle of this student journal. It's different from the journal in terms of like the presentation I had today or my planning. It's a reflection of the presentation. In terms of the assessment type, it's an assessment for learning and as learning. And the main purpose is to help students to summarize the lesson in their own words, which is a feedback for them, but at the same time, it's an incredibly valuable feedback for me, whether what I try to communicate as the main point, whether I communicated well, whether they understood what the focus was. For the students to plan the follow-up steps after the lesson or after the presentation. And for me to know what are their takeaways. In other words, whether they learned what I wanted them to learn, which is slightly different from the point here talking about the summarizing the lesson. And in a second, you will see an example. And the example is right here. Again, you see the one page, and eventually I will talk about each of the parts. But looking at the whole page, this is an A5 page. In other words, on one A4 or letter-sized paper, there are 2 columns, and one column is for each presentation. And what you may notice that there's white part and a green part. The white part, students go ahead and write without needing any information from me, while the green part is specific to each presentation. So here they write down what they have learned, realized, or practiced. They have to answer 2 of these points. Next one. Before the next lesson, I need to either review, practice, or learn. Again, they need to answer at least 2. And last point or question, which is the same for all our presentation, is what is my question related to today's topic? Here at the bottom, it says Lucie's thoughts or reactions, where I write them a quick note, reaction to what they wrote. And here comes the green part, today's question. Today's question, I always connect with the topic discussed. In other words, for example, practicing with the adolescent level or with the more advanced students, the difference between present simple and present perfect and past simple, that the task may be, or the question may be, write down 2 sentences, one include the word ago and one include the word since. So they write down the sentences, and that's a very quick feedback for me whether they got the point of the presentation or not. So here they write the question, and here they answer. Here are my answers or my thoughts, reactions to their work. And last but not least, I really like to use today's scale. And again, the scale is different from presentation to presentation. It may gear, or it may target the flow of the lesson. It may target their activity. Few examples for all. How active was I today during the presentation? When I saw that the activity or focus was not very at the level where I expected it to be. So here they would write my activity and they would circle 10 being the best. I was active all the time. 1, yes, I was there physically, but not mentally. And this scale is a very quick way how to collect information for me that's not connected directly with the knowledge or the learning process, but more with the feeling and flow of the group. And here's an example. As you may see that the format is slightly different. And the reason why it's different is that this is my first year format, and what I presented to you a few minutes ago was the updated format, which I think is much more clear. So here you can also see the outcome of the assessment circle turning into a spiral. So here, for example, one student said that he learned many cooking verbs like fry, slice, stir, and so on. Before the next lesson, I need to practice cooking verbs, for example. Here are my reactions and comments to their questions. And just to see more than one example, I included one from a different student. You can also see that the length of my reaction or answer is different, just very much depending on what they were interested in. Example number 3, speaking assessment. The assessment type is for learning and of learning. And the main purpose is to assess the speaking abilities of children aged 3 to 15 using the approach one picture for all. Maybe it's described somewhere in some very smart books, but this is a term I came up with because I was thinking really hard how to run a speaking assessment that I could use with the CASA children at the same time with the adolescent children. And here is the outcome. I took one picture, which is more user-friendly for the younger children, but the older children were not appalled of that because it's, looks like from some course book. This is a picture from one of the Cambridge tests. And I showed this picture to the children. I was doing one-on-one assessments with them. So they were holding the picture, and I asked them one question. What do you see in the picture? And here's an example of my notes. For example, here there was a 9-year-old pupil where the left part here before the arrow, that's what my interaction with the child was. So first I asked them, what do you see in the picture? And the child started to mention, describe the nouns that are there. And then was kind of stuck. So I started asking him, is mom happy? The answer was no. Why not? Here, what is in the green boxes are answers in Czech. And all the answers in Czech are answering my English questions. So this is also very important information for me, that the child understands what I'm saying, but is not capable of answering it in English yet. So here with the 9-year-old, you can see how many questions I needed to ask to run about 3-4 minute dialogue. As opposed to this 7-year-old, I asked him, what do you see? And here at the very bottom, I have a note in Czech, he didn't want to stop. So I had to say, thank you very much. That's it. He was actually a little upset because he wanted to continue. But going back to the purpose of this one picture for all assessment is that we can see how far the children have gone in terms of the communication abilities in English. And I'm planning on continuing with this assessment because this time I ran it as a trial with the lower elementary children, and I wanted to see whether I will be able to collect some valuable information. And because the information is incredibly valuable, and it will be connected to what you will see in a second, is that I'm definitely planning on continuing with this approach. In-house assessment. The type of assessment, it's for learning and off learning. And the main purpose is to document the children's English language abilities in order to document their progress over time. And this is really the key information, it's over time. Because what we started last year at our school is the long-term assessment. And it's really incredible when I run the assessment at the beginning of the school year, September, October, and then at the end of the school year, so that's end of May, beginning of June. And last year, as it was the first year, at the end of the school year, when I was comparing the outcomes of the assessment from the beginning of the school year and the end, it was incredible to see how much information we can get from the assessment only by comparing the information. Because one assessment tells us some information, but what gets more valuable is when we get to compare the assessment over time that follows the same format. And the next purpose is to assess the effectiveness of our English language program and to identify its strengths and weaknesses. This is an example of an assessment that helps or answers questions to all three constituents I mentioned at the very beginning. So it's the pupils, of course, the teachers as well, the school and the parents, because we are able to come and say, look, your child in September did not say a word, but reacted non-verbally to everything that was said to them. Now he speaks in short sentences. Look, this is the progress your child has done in a year. So this is really a treasure. And actually today I started assessing year number 2 with our CASA children. And it's really remarkable to see how they learn, how they grow. And on top of everything, of this good feeling we can have is that we have hard data. And going forward with this is that you may ask, how do they record the data? I forgot one more point, which is connected with collecting the data, is that we are not assessing knowledge of specific vocabulary, but we want to assess the language skills. So the language skills we assess with the CASA children are these 4 areas. understanding, spoken interaction, answering, the ability to ask questions, and spoken production. Spoken production is that when you show someone a picture and ask them, what do you see? It's like the example I shown you before, and they should start speaking. This is a very hard discipline. So for those who master it, you know that they are capable of the skills that are kind of lower on the ladder. But if they are not capable of that, as with the 9-year-old student with the in-house, with the one picture for all, I was asking them questions, they were answering. And how to convert this verbally noted or like verbal information that I write down into some data. I created these scales where I try to write down all the tiny baby steps within each of the language skills. And here and there, I add another one, which is based on the observations when I realize, oh, I've forgotten that there is this phase. But at this moment, more or less, after 2.5 or 3 years of fine-tuning this tool, I think the most important phases are there. So how does it work? I run the assessment with the children where I always have 2 children. I speak to 2 children at the same time. They have the same tasks, but I always give them different pictures. So it's much more friendly for them that they're there with their friend and they can speak to each other. Therefore, I can observe also their interaction, and I don't have to be the one who they interact with. And this way I get more information about them. So I ran the assessment, which is about 10, maximum 15 minutes long. And then I take my notes, which are again standardized. I have the same ones for the same sheet for all the assessments. And I do this. I look at the assessment sheet and I note what I observed during the assessment. Here, when it says not applicable, it does not mean that the child doesn't know how to ask questions, but during the assessment, there was not a situation where the child had to use this skill. And of course, I have a box with notes where I write down these comments, such as not applicable means that there was no need to ask questions during the assessment. So this is the outcome of the assessment. Now, I was really thinking hard how to turn this into some numbers and to be able to observe whether the child is progressing or regressing, which may happen as well. So the outcome is that I have, from last September, I have this spreadsheet, and then I have another one from June. And what happens when I look at the 2 sheets is that I can see, oh, in September, the child was here, but now in June, it is here. So it is +2 fields. And so on. So comparing it beginning of the year to the end of the year and to the beginning of the following year, I use this plus, minus, or 0 advancements. With the 0 advancements, it doesn't mean that anything is bad, but it just may be that it's the child reached the top skill. And in that case, I have a top note there that the child did not advance because it's at the top. And it was really interesting to see the reactions of our staff when I showed them the system, because I wanted their feedback, whether they think that this is something that could be of use to them. And they said, yes, definitely this long-term assessment is something that we really want to follow up. Because this webinar, we have limited time. I did not introduce the whole in-house assessment tool. Here is more the outcomes. But eventually, if you have any questions, you can ask me. You can send me an email, which I'll mention at the end. So I just want to wrap it up, this example number 4, before we get to example number 5, which is what I call the elementary challenges. And this is a system inspired by the Dylan Williams work, the 3-color test. It's an assessment of learning with in a formative format. And the main purpose is to provide children with feedback on what they have learned over the 4 to 6 week period. So that's a feedback for them. And it also is a very important feedback for me, whether the outcome, what are the outcomes of the learning process is with the children. And last but not the least, it provides parents with tangible evidence of the learning outcomes of their children over time. Because what I do is I collect the challenges, and when we have consultations with the parents, I show them the challenges and they say, oh, he or she has really progressed, because at the beginning of the school year was working this way, and now it's working, it's at a very different and higher level. That's one aspect. And second of all, when the parents see what the children are working on, what they're learning, very frequently they say, oh, what does this mean? I would not be able to do that. So it's a very friendly way how to show the parents the way we work. And the formative aspect of this challenge comes from the 3-color test. And before I show you the 3-color test or the challenge, as I don't like to use the word test, is I was afraid that the children will not like it, that they will say, oh, we hate tests because in our they have to take 2 tests every school year. So it's at the end of the term, they have to pass the test and see what they've learned in all the subjects, meaning Czech language, math, and the cosmic education, and English. And because I perceive that the twice a year is not enough, that it doesn't provide the children, nor me, nor the parents with the feedback we need, I came up with these challenges. And the reason why the children like the challenges so much is that I am the last person to correct it. The way it works is that they have a page, and they're supposed to write down the tasks. So they finish the challenge, then I ask them to take a different pen, pencil, color pencil, and I show them the correct answers. So what they do is they correct their work against the master I provide them with. So that's the 2nd color. And then the 3rd color comes in when necessary. Sometimes it's not necessary, is that I have my green pen, and if they missed something, I correct it at that moment. But the most important correction and revision is done by themselves. And I'll never forget, this was a 4th grader who experienced the twice a year exams. And after after they took the test, they said, Lucy, what is my score? What is my score? And I said, but the score is not the most important. You need to, it's about what you've learned, what you have not learned. But it was as if he did not understand me. The score was the most important. Then, when he took this challenge, the only thing he said, when are we going to have the next challenge? He did not ask about the points. And the way I interpret it is that because they are the main correctors of their work, they stop worrying about comparing each other's results, but because they're trying to be the best against themselves. So going back to these examples, I think this is quite self-explanatory. And also here you can see some of my notes. Sorry, sometimes it is in Czech. That, for example, here it says, I noted down that she corrected it herself when she was reading it. Because what I do with the children when they finish writing, they correct their work, and then I ask them to bring it to me and read it to me. So that's why I have these checks here. It means that all the reading was without any mistakes. So on top of the writing and reading skills, writing and reading, yes, in terms of fulfilling the tasks, there's also out loud reading done. And it doesn't take any extra time, because as the children are finishing at different time, within half an hour, there's like 6 or 8 children being able to take this challenge. And here's an example of a challenge for non-writing children. So those are the lower elementary 6-7-year-old children. Is that I always have 2 copies of the challenge, where they have 1 copy and 1 is with me, where I write their name, and they keep saying, I always point, so what is this? And they answer. And my really quick way of taking notes how they answered: green, without any problem, right away. Yellow, I had to help a little bit, usually with the first sound of the word. And the red one is even, I was saying I like didn't react to it. Or here, ma, mouth didn't come out. So that's why I had the red mark. So this is a inspiration also for running the challenges for non-reading and non-writing students in English as a second language. Just to summarize all the examples I shared with you today, that as you can see that here what I noted, that 3 out of the 5 were, from my perspective, by definition, overlapping 2 assessment types, where the for learning in terms of my teaching notes and off learning in terms of the elementary challenges. At the same time, the challenges is assessment for learning for me as well. It's a feedback for me to know, it's a feedback for me how the children are progressing, whether I introduced the topic in a coherent way. And to summarize the talk today, I try to use the analogy of an onion and with the different layers it has, and really try to take it one by one. So we looked at the parties involved, the types of assessment. We talked about the process, how to run the assessment and what not to forget. And the examples showed all the 3 previous layers in practice. Thank you very much for your attention. Good luck on your assessment adventures. And please remember that assessment is our helper, not something that is just needs to get done and get over with. So thank you very much.